Well, one of the things that we thought was important was if you're going to think about economic systems, where's the starting place? And it seemed to us that it was very important to say, well, before you design something, you should have clear in mind what the goals that you're trying to achieve are. Don't just sit down and start, designing certain procedures until you know, well, how are we going, against what are we going to measure these procedures? So we can define them, we can explain how something should be done, but first you want to know what you're trying to accomplish. And we said, well, there's been a broad sense of agreement amongst progressive-minded people for a long period of time that we would like the economy to be democratic, just like people would like political systems to be more democratic and less authoritarian or totalitarian. That democracy is a good thing in human life, not just in politics, but also in our economic decisions. Now, while there's a broad consensus that more economic democracy is good, that doesn't mean that everybody defines exactly what economic democracy is in the same way. And we said, well, let's be careful about this. Yeah, we want economic democracy. Who doesn't? But what does that mean? And we said, well, it means people should have decision-making input or power to the degree or in proportion to the extent that that economic decision affects their lives. So we called that self-management, decision-making authority in proportion to the degree you're affected. And it's important because lots of economic decisions affect lots of people, and they don't affect people necessarily to the same extent. Most economic decisions affect some people more than others. Well, the goal should be try and design procedures for making decisions that at least roughly reflect the degree to which people are affected. That's the degree to which the decision-making process should involve them, incorporate them, empower them. Second goal was, well, we want the economy to be fair. We want economic justice. We want the economy to be equitable. Economists say equitable. Everybody else says economic justice. But when economists say equitable, it's just they mean the same thing. Another way of putting it is, in any economy, there will be burdens that people bear, and there will be benefits that come from our economic cooperation with one another. So another way to say that you want the economy to be equitable is you want the economy to distribute the burdens and benefits of economic activity in a way that's fair and equitable. Again, that's a broad principle that many could agree on, but then if you asked people, but what is a fair distribution of burdens and benefits, you would probably get different answers depending on who you asked. Now, it's important. If you're designing an economy to deliver equity, you have to be careful to define, and what do you consider to be fair and equitable? And our conclusion was that what really is fair and equitable would be consumption rights or privileges that are in proportion to the degree of the efforts and sacrifices people have made. That is actually what's fair. And there's a lot of competing notions of what's fair. But if you think that, well, everybody should benefit equally from the economy, unless some people actually make greater sacrifices than others, then yes, it would be fair that they would benefit more if they sacrificed more. If that is your notion of what it really means to have a fair distribution of burdens and benefits, then say so, be clear about that, and that's going to be the measure of success with regard to equity when you look at whether your system you've designed accomplishes that or doesn't accomplish that. We wanted the economy to be efficient. And here is where a lot of confusion sets in. As soon as you say for people who are disenamored of capitalism and who have heard mainstream economists talk about capitalism, they hear the mainstream economists saying, well, what's good about our present system is it's efficient. That maybe you think there's something unfair about it, but at least it's doing things efficiently. And so there's a tendency on the left to disregard efficiency and say, we don't need to concern ourselves with that. That's what they care about. We care about fairness. We care about protecting the environment. We care about people being involved in decision making. They care about efficiency. We don't. Well, maybe I'm an economist, so maybe that's why I don't buy into that. But I think that reasonable people, if they just think about it for a minute, realize, well, look, if efficiency is defined as don't waste scarce resources, well, that's sensible. You don't want an economy whose decision-making procedures predictably lead to wastefulness of scarce resources. You don't want to, let's just look at our own labor. As long as work is sometimes less enjoyable than leisure, do you really want to work more than you'd have to get the same thing? Well, most people don't. So efficiency, when properly defined, the business community equates efficiency with profitability, which is not even a correct definition of efficiency in mainstream economic theory. But in any case, you don't, all other things being equal, it's more desirable if the economy is efficient rather than inefficient. And so that's all we mean. You don't have to elevate. Suppose there were a conflict of interest between, we could do things one way and the results would be more fair. Or we could do them a different way and the results would be less fair but more efficient. You don't have to elevate the goal of efficiency and put it on top of everything else and say it's more important than all the others. But I think it's still worth listing as a goal. Yes, we want the economy to be more democratic. Yes, we want the economy to be more fair. Yes, we want the economy to be more efficient. And we want the economy to protect the environment rather than to destroy the environment. So we want the economy to achieve environmental sustainability, which is increasingly something, that people are realizing is a very, very important thing for us to focus attention on. So those were the goals. We said, is it possible to, if you set these out as your goals, economic democracy defined as decision-making input in proportion to the degree you're affected by economic decisions. Economic justice defined as reward for effort and sacrifice. If somebody has greater effort and sacrifice, then they deserve somewhat greater reward that's commensurate with the magnitude of, the extra effort or sacrifice they put in. You want the economy to be efficient. You simply don't want to waste people's work time, and you don't want to waste scarce resources and use them in a way that they're less valuable and are producing, less valuable goods and services. And it's very, very important that you want the economy to be environmentally sustainable. We also would like the economic system to reinforce solidarity rather than undermine it. And we also said, this was partly in contrast to communism as the alternative to capitalism. In the normal discourse, one of the criticisms of communism, rightly so, was that it didn't provide any variety of options for people. And that whatever good or bad you say about capitalism, at least it provides sort of a variety of goods and services that I could choose Pepsi or I could choose Coke. Now, sometimes that's ridiculed but that's just a silly kind of diversity. They actually are the same. But we said, no, it is important that people will find, it is a system that generates a diversity of life options and lifestyles and economic activities. The general idea is people are very different. Some people want this, some people want that. And so you don't want to design a system that works for this kind of person who likes that kind of thing. You want to design a system that generates a real diversity of options that are available to people. So those were the goals. And we said, now, if those are your goals and you keep those in mind, what would be a set of institutions that you could, what economic institutions, which are simply, an economic institution is sort of a major set, it's a set of, an economic institution is ways that we're going to go about making certain kinds of decisions. What are the major institutions we want? In contrast, for instance, the major institutions that define a capitalist economy are what we call private enterprise, private ownership of factories and farms, and then people go and work for the owners, of people go and work as employees, working for employers who are the ones who own the means of production. That's one defining institution of capitalism, and then the exchange of goods and services through markets is the second defining institution of a capitalist economy. Feudalism didn't have those institutions. Communism had different institutions. Almost every major economic system has a few defining institutions that basically that's what makes it an economic system that in some ways is different from other economic systems. So now it's time, after you know what you're trying to accomplish, to see, well, what will the defining economic institutions look like for an economy that would be designed to deliver on these goals?